Hello reader, I am here to film a video that basically I want to procrastinate on filming, so I'm like, let's just do it or otherwise it is never gonna happen. What video am I talking about? I mean, you know it because you pressed on that thumbnail, but I'm talking about my March wrap-up. Because if you are a regular over here, you know that I've been running behind on my wrap-ups. I don't know since when actually anymore at this point in time, but I feel like it's been a while. I think my January one was like super late and that just kind of derailed everything, but who knows, maybe it was already going on before January even. But so yeah, definitely my February wrap up, it was like there at somewhere in April, right, I guess. So, you know, I am hoping to catch up. I've already filmed the April wrap up, so I'm filming the March wrap up right now, and then hopefully that just means that I will be on track again so that when May closes out I can just film the May wrap up in a timely fashion and bring it to you in a timely fashion. Okay, so here we go. Now, I have said that I'm procrastinating on this video, and the reason is that my memory is really not that reliable, and sometimes, you know, it was a week after I finished the book and I'm already like, wait, how did that end again? And then, you know, it will come back to me if I just like think about it for a while. But the longer that goes between me finishing a book and me having to talk about a book, the less likely that I am to actually still remember what it is about. And so that is my fear when it comes to this March wrap-up. But so, in the month of March I read 9 books. That has been my average so far all year. And when I say my average, I mean that is exactly what I've read so far. In January I read 9 books. In February I read 9 books. In March I read 9 books. Spoiler alert, in April I will not read 9 books. So let's just go over them. And we are going to start off with one that is already like, do I remember what this is about? So the first book that I finished in March was Mama Day by Gloria Naylor. This is magical realist story set in the US, and it's set in what I believe is a fictional place, because it's a fictional place. It's like not claimed by any of the US states. It's like at the verge between Georgia and some other state, but it's not actually a part of either one of these. And so the people there are kind of like left to their own devices because they're not actually paying taxes to any of these other states, but nor are they getting the support from those other states. So as a consequence, the community there is very much a tight-knit community. However, that doesn't mean that there aren't its own troubles within there. For example, what I can remember is that there's this sort of like toxic relationship that this one woman has with her guy, where the guy kind of like strays all the time, it seems, or like she's keeping too tight of a leash. Not entirely sure anymore. But basically we're following this character called Mama Day, who's kind of like a matriarch shaman type figure within this society. There's a lot to do also with the backstory of how her family made it to this part of the island, but I'm not entirely sure about any of that anymore. And we're also following her granddaughter, I think, who is not living on the island anymore. She is living in the mainland in a big city, and we are kind of looking at a relationship that unfolds there and the derailing of circumstances that happen when they visit this place. I have a full reading review for this one that I suggest you go and see if you're interested in this book, because I really don't actually remember anymore. I know that there's a lot of interesting things to talk about when it comes to this book. I know that because when I did that review, I did go into quite a lot of the thematics with it and things like that, and I did find it very interesting to look and reflect on that. But now I'm just like, what? I would need a recap of the actual events to be able to think back on my thoughts about that. I would like to say that I know so much more about the next one than I did about that one, but actually that's not even that true, because the next one is Heartless Hunter by Kristen Cicciarelli. This is the first book in a duology, which is the Crimson Moth duology, and like I know the premise of this book and I know parts of this book, but considering that this is a 5-star read, a lot of it has already gone. But so this is a book that was a real ride for me. I was hooked, line and sinker, you know, like I was immediately like, I'm there, I want this, I'm shipping this, I want to know where it's going to happen. So basically we're looking at this vigilante figure who's called the Crimson Moth. I believe she is a witch. Is that a storyline? I think she's a witch, right? And the other guy is a witch hunter. In any case, he's hunting whatever she is, but I think it's witch, that she's a witch. And she has been, I think it is like that. Let's just go with that. So she's a witch in a society that is like, it used to be run by these queens who were witches. And so at that point in time, witches were sort of like supreme. The society was very open to witches. Witches were very much accepted. However, these queens were quite cruel, and so when they ended up being overthrown, the society went the complete opposite way, and witches were hunted and killed at that point in time. So the Crimson Moth is a character who is basically roaming the streets as a vigilante character, but she's also trying to save witches from these hunters and get them out of this city, land, I'm not entirely sure what the structure is, and yeah, I don't fully remember the exact details of the plotline, but basically she has to get close to this hunter who's basically like pretty high up in the hunter society and who's the brother of her best friends, and he considers like that she might actually be the Crimson Moth, so he also wants to get close to her in order to figure out whether this crazy idea that he has that she might be the Crimson Moth is actually not that crazy after all, because basically she is pretending to be this vapid socialite, and that is a mask that can basically serve her very well in order to get access where she needs it and, you know, stay off of the radar of people. She also in the past has like handed in her family members to the witch hunters, which also gives her a lot of like street cred, because of course a lot of people are like, well, she handed in her own family members, so of course she is loyal to this political structure. So it's an enemies to lovers, clearly, and it's a very much drawn out one, okay, which I don't always love. Sometimes I'm just very like impatient with that, and I just get very annoyed with how long they draw it out. And this one, you know, it's a duology. I need to get to the second one, and clearly I need to get to it sooner rather than later, because I'm already forgetting things about it, though quite a fair bit of it came back once I started talking about it. The next book that I read is a book that I didn't necessarily say that I didn't want to read the sequel once I finished it, but now I'm like, do I want to read the sequel? And that is The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. Now, the reason I needed this was because I needed a biopunk book, okay? Because this is a murder mystery fantasy, so it's like, yeah, that is like not my deal, okay? I don't like murder mystery, and this very much is murder mystery fantasy, okay? It's not like sometimes the murder mystery is like a side plot or part of the plot, one part of a bigger plot, the trigger to a plot, but here it is the plot, okay? We are following the assistant to a investigator, let's say, who is basically called to the scene at the beginning of this book. So we really start off with the immediate aftermath of a murder, and this murder happens in the bathroom, I think, or something like that, and the guy basically has a tree growing out of it. So our protagonist, who basically acquired his position in a not straightforward way, because he basically was not expected to have these opportunities. He basically will, together with the investigator, look into all the particulars surrounding this murder, trying to figure out who is behind it and try to avoid any further murders from happening. I did find the world very interesting, because this is a world, as I said, it's biopunk, so it has a lot of biotechnology. There are all these mushrooms that, you know, like basically you can protect your house by having a certain mushroom grow near the entrance, and then you know you need a certain substance, chemical substance with you in order for the mushrooms not to react to your entrance, or you have like lights made out of mushrooms, or you have basically like an air filtering system out of mushrooms, for example. And this world is also under attack from these sort of like giant sea creatures, and so a part of the plot will also be about the basically the protection of the land, as we will in part be taking place as the story will in part be taking place around the seaside and the defense of the city walls, as well as a bigger conspiracy that is going on. I did like the bigger conspiracy type of aspect, and as I said, the world building, but honestly it is just going to be another case, and you know, it didn't interest me enough, I don't think so. The next thing that I read is something that I really cannot talk about, and at this point in time I also don't remember nothing about it to be able to tell you anything, I guess, because this is a short story anthology, which is The King Must Fall. I backed this over on Kickstarter years ago, and I finally read it because for r/fantasy there's always the prompt to read 5 short stories, and so and the hard mode for that is read a full short story anthology, and I finally did so. I think in other versions of r/fantasy where I was like just checking if I made it without trying to make it, I just always exchanged that prompt, I guess, because you know I don't read much short stories, so it would not be something that naturally happens in a year normally, and that is to some extent sad because I do like short stories, and there definitely were some short stories within here that I really liked. There's one with like a Selkie on a ship, and then like the avarice of men trying to gain control of her fur, and there's one with like an artifact that basically gives the power of the kingdom to somebody, and then sort of once again the avarice of people in trying to get their hands on this item, and how that creates a lot of bloodshed in the history of this world and things like that. So as the title suggests, The King Must Fall, the guiding principle or the theme running through this collection is kingdoms, and in this case kingdoms that are on the brink of falling, as in the king needs to be assassinated, either because the king is a bad guy, but there can also be other reasons. I enjoyed the collection overall. I will say, as always, of course, there are stronger pieces in there, and then there are pieces that didn't really do much for me, and unfortunately I'm gonna have to look back at my own vlog, I think, for this, to kind of remember the ones that were of interest to me, so that I can maybe check out these authors in other works of them, so that I can see whether maybe their long form works work for me. Next up, I read a historical fiction, which is A Beast Links Towards Beijing by Alice Evelyn Young. This is a new release, it's a February release, and this is a book that deals with a Chinese girl who is living in London or the US, not entirely sure anymore. One day she comes home and her father is on her doorstep. However, her father has been like missing from her life for a very long time. He disappeared at some point in time when she was still young, I think. And the story deals mainly with him reflecting back on his past and basically telling her about all the things that he has gone through in his childhood, and the sort of like curse that has hung over him for a very long time, and that led him to abandon his family basically in an attempt to protect them against this curse. And simultaneously, of course, we're also exploring the feelings that she has of abandonment and the impact that that had on her. This is very much a look back at the time period of the Japanese occupation of China, at the Cultural Revolution. Tiananmen does not take place within this book. I thought we were potentially going there when he moved to Beijing at some point to study there, but it didn't end up taking place within this book. But I definitely think it was a good one. I have read other books that deal with this exact time period. And so I would say that I did prefer Wild Swans and Beijing Coma over this one, but I definitely do think that I still enjoyed this one, and I think this is a very powerful time period in Chinese history to talk about. And maybe maybe an overrepresented one, but on the other hand, maybe it's just a period that I just gravitate towards in terms of a concept, because when I studied Chinese, the time period that we studied was this exact time period, and so actually I've never, I think, maybe Snowfire and the Secret Fan did take place maybe in an older China. I don't actually remember now, but I don't often read about China before the modern period, and so but maybe that is just my own bias, because I do find that period very interesting in terms of all of its turmoil and all of the changes that were taking place within China within that time period. Next, I read The House Witch by Dellenbach, and that reminds me that that's another one I really want to jump into now. And actually this is really not good, because all the things that I now want to jump into are like books that I don't have on my physical TBR. I need to get a crack on getting this thing reduced. But so The House Witch is a cozy fantasy with quite a romance-leaning plot as well, though I would definitely say that it doesn't feel like the story is about getting these two characters together, neither. But basically we're following a cook in a castle, and this cook is basically just trying to live a normal, drama-free life. But he's a type of character, you know, where everything ends up getting revolving around him, you know. He demands discipline, he knows how to deal with people, but he's conceived of as being like a very grumpy person, a very uncooperative person. But on the other hand, he's also somebody who gets things done, and who, you know, whatever is happening in the castle, he somehow is involved. I enjoyed this one a whole lot. I thought that the main character is just real fun, and I really enjoyed hearing more about what was happening in the castle under his guidance. So I'm looking forward to continuing on with this series and seeing what else we have in store. I wouldn't have minded this just being a standalone, because I do think that it works perfectly well like that. But who knows, maybe it's like, I don't have any objection to continuing on with it. I just wonder what we're gonna do with this next, and because I don't know, for example, if it's always gonna be this. I just don't know how I feel about cozy fantasy series. I haven't read a cozy fantasy series yet, I feel like, and so I don't really know how I feel about cozy fantasy stories going on in multiple books. So I guess So I guess I can find out with this series. From cozy to horror, next I read The Brides by Charlotte Cross, which is a Brides of Dracula retelling, and I really enjoyed this one a whole lot. I would definitely say, like, if you are looking for a horror to listen to or read, you can read as well, but listen, I definitely think it has a really good audiobook. For the month of October, save this one for then, because this is a story of the Brides of Dracula, but we're basically looking at this story from the perspective but we're basically telling this story mainly from the future, looking back, and the story is completely told through journal entries and letters. Basically we are following this guy who has had certain dealings with the events taking place within the story of Dracula. He is now working as a doctor in a mental health institution where a patient comes across his path that he is trying to help, and there might be a link back to Dracula in her story. So as he starts examining her and interviewing her, he finds out more about her history with the Count. And so I love this one a whole lot. It's got lesbian yearning. What else do we need? It's got Dracula, lesbian yearning, vampires, journal entries, letters. Amazing. Atmosphere was great. I absolutely enjoyed every second of this audiobook. Next up, a book that I do physically own, but apparently I don't have it with me right now, and I'm not gonna grab it because, as I said, I've been procrastinating this video, and actually, you know, this one shows once again that there is no real reason for procrastination, because in the end I'm really not minding this video at all. But so that is To Ride a Rising Storm by Monokill Black Goose, which is a sequel to The Shape of Dragon's Breath, the second book in the Nampeche Wasted series. So this is a fantasy of manners, I would say, that is taking place in a fictionalized version of the US. Our protagonist is a young Native American girl, basically, who is the first sort of like Native American who has grown up in a purely Native American surroundings, who is bonded to a dragon and is therefore being trained at this sort of like academy for dragon riders. She is there going to room together with a white society girl who has not really had any experience and has all of the, you know, sort of like prejudices surrounding Native Americans, and then a Native American boy who has basically been grown up in white society, as he was adopted by a stable master, I think, and so it's actually in that surrounding that he bonded to a dragon. And so yeah, it's about her journey there. I very much like this one. I like the way that it is told. I like the flow of it and the feel of it, and it's not your typical sort of like, I don't know, bitchy teenagers at an academic setting, as it might have sounded based on how I introduced it. But so yeah, I would definitely say like it's quite unique. It's a young adult, so do know that going into it, but I would highly encourage you to pick it up, because I've definitely been enjoying it. And I think I enjoyed the second one even more, because I kind of didn't fully remember my feelings over the first one. I was like, I think I was kind of like okay about it, but because it doesn't really lean one way or another in terms of things that I've experienced before, I also didn't really know what to do with my time with it. Like, did I love this? Did I enjoy this? And with the second one, I definitely feel like I was definitely enjoying myself. It was definitely clear that I was enjoying the interactions between the characters a whole lot. In the second one, we see a lot more of outside world interference into the Native American society, a lot more control being placed on their movements, their activities, and so it's taking on even more of a political nature in that sense. And then the final thing that I read in the month of March is One Piece Volume 1. I needed this for r/fantasy for the pirates prompts. In the end, I went for the easy mode of just having seafaring pirates, because I just didn't have the time to do anything else. And I will say that as my first experience with One Piece, it wasn't that great, because it was like, okay, yeah. But to be fair, a manga is over so fast that I think a first book in a series is hard-pressed to completely convince me. But this one, I don't know, it definitely made me feel like, it's a little bit, I don't know, too young for me maybe. Maybe I need to watch the TV show or something like that for a bit to see if that is something that I enjoy, and that can maybe get me into the manga. On the other hand, do I really want to get into a manga series that is as long as One Piece is? Maybe not. But so yeah, that is my month of March. I'll have a visual over here of my March statistics, and you know, I know that something went seriously wrong at some point with my TBR. And I don't know whether it's in March or April or a combination of the two. So yeah, these figures will speak for themselves. And, and as I just said, clearly indicated, they will not be solved in the month of April. But so yeah, I'm going to be ending the video here. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and see you guys for the next one. Bye!